Thank you all very much for inviting me to be part of your event. I especially want to thank all the people who work so hard to plan and arrange the event, and I also want to thank the translators for helping me out here since I do not speak Spanish. I should mention that in my role at Duke University, the organization that works with me is part of the Duke University libraries. We are physically located in the library, and we are part of the library as an organization. Before I start talking to you, I would like to hear some ideas from you. And so I'm asking you to think a little bit about something you've heard, something you've experienced, or an opinion you have about MOOCs, and to pretend that you are writing the headline of a news article in something like the Chronicle of Higher Education or a newspaper. So take just a minute and think about what your headline about MOOCs would say. And I'm going to give you a minute, and then I'm going to ask a couple of you to tell me what you would say if you were writing the news about MOOCs today. Are there a couple of brave people who would be willing to tell me what your MOOC headline would say? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious to hear what you're thinking.
Blaine, I'll start out.
Okay.
MOOCs are the end of civilization as we know it.
MOOCs are the end of civilization as we know it. All right, there's one headline. And I think I've seen that headline. What would one of your MOOC headlines say? Anybody else? Yes?
MOOCs can also be used on campus.
MOOCs can be used on campus. All right, maybe one more. One more person? At the back?
Improve your class. Do a MOOC.
Okay, I couldn't quite catch that one. Maybe someone can repeat it for me.
Improve your class. Do a MOOC.
Improve your class, do a MOOC. All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to show you some of the actual headlines that we've seen over the last year or two, at least in the United States. I suspect you may have seen them here too. So some of them are in the category that I would call MOOC-tastic. Learning becomes a joy again. The big idea that can revolutionize higher education, MOOC. MOOCs, they're a cracking good idea. How many of you had a headline that expressed this incredible, exuberant optimism about MOOCs? Nobody? Anybody? I see one hand. A couple people. All right. This one, I think, is the one that we heard from Jennifer, MOOC apocalypse, the attack of the MOOCs, the end of higher education's golden era. Report warns of avalanche approaching for global higher education. How many of you had a headline that was in this general category of the end of higher education as we know it? A couple people, okay. I think people are being shy. And finally, the third category, MOOC collapse. MOOC's been there, done that. 2014, the year the media stopped caring about MOOCs, beyond MOOC hype, it's all over. How many of you had a headline that was kind of in that category? Anybody? Okay, a few people, or at least a few people who are willing to say so. All right. Before I start talking about the logistics of planning and pedagogy, I wanted to give you some background that MOOCs right now are a highly controversial subject, at least in the United States, and educators and librarians and instructional technologists have very strong feelings about them, both positive and negative. MOOCs are very different from in-person courses, and they're even very different from traditional online courses that have been around for the last 15 or 20 years. MOOCs are also different from each other. So when I talk about planning and pedagogy, it's not as if the thing that we're producing is all one thing and they're all alike. They're changing very rapidly. They're part of an overall ecosystem in higher education. They're not something that stands by themselves. And they're really too new to have any one right way of creating and teaching them. And I would suggest that what we do not know about MOOCs is much greater than what we do know about them at the moment. So here are the things that I'll talk about. Some general things about goals and planning, pedagogy, personnel and production planning, project management, teaching the course, assessment, impact on teaching and learning broadly, and some things that I think are important trends for the future that will affect the future development of MOOCs. Every place that develops a MOOC has its own reasons for doing so, and these are the key reasons so far why we've been creating MOOCs at Duke. Our first and most important reason is that we wanted them to be a lever for encouraging teaching innovation. We wanted our faculty to try new things, to understand some of the new online technologies that are developing, and to generally be more creative and innovative in their teaching. So that's the first goal. A second goal, sharing knowledge and service to society, is part of the university's strategic plan and has been for almost 10 years. And that is Duke very much wants to be a university that shares its research and its teaching with an international audience. And a third goal for Duke is to showcase our academic excellence, and by that we mean that we have outstanding faculty and we think some very interesting programs, and we want more people to know about that. That's why we're creating MOOCs at Duke, and our process reflects those goals. Just to give you a feeling for what we've done so far, Duke has several schools within the university. Every school except for one has created at least one MOOC. And within the schools, there's a lot of diversity in the subject areas that they address. We are in the process of developing a MOOC by one of the people in our library. I think it is the person who is roughly equivalent to someone who spoke earlier. It's our copyright and intellectual property specialist, who is both a librarian and an attorney. And then just for good measure, he also has a divinity degree. But he's the person who advises us on copyright and intellectual property issues. And he and librarians from 2 other universities are getting together, and as of July, we'll be producing a MOOC called Copyright for Educators. So look for that, and maybe some of you will even take that. We also have been using some of these MOOCs as a way of showcasing some of our very finest digital collections from our library. And this is just some of the ones that we've created, not all of them. We're using Coursera as our delivery platform, and we have MOOCs that we've created that are broad introductory level subjects like Introduction to Genetics and Evolution, and then we have MOOCs that are much more specialized, such as one from the law school on international human rights law, a much more specialized and high-level course. So we have done MOOCs at all different levels and all different subject areas. Of the 20 MOOCs that we've developed and taught so far, many of them have been taught a second or third time. And going back to that goal of driving innovation in teaching, 14 of them have been used to change the campus course from which the MOOC came. 8 of the MOOC courses have been used for research studies, and many of them have also resulted in flipped courses or hybrid courses using MOOC materials. So the first thing I always recommend to people regarding pedagogical planning for a MOOC is before you do anything, take a look around and see what's already been done. Because even though MOOCs have only been around for about 2 years, there are a lot of them out there. There are at least 800 or 900 MOOCs just on the Coursera and edX platform. And the 28 Spanish MOOCs that I heard about today, they're not counted in that number because I didn't know about those. So I decided to take a quick look at the MOOCs that are about data analysis and statistics. just on these 5 platforms. And I think I counted, I'm taking a quick look here, there were something like 92 MOOCs on data analysis and statistics already there. So one thing I try to say in working with faculty is, why do you want to do a course? Because many of them come and say, I want to do a course on statistics. And I always say, are you sure we really need another MOOC on statistics? And if so, what is it that would make your course different or an adjunct to something that's already been done? And of course, usually the answer is because I do it better than anybody else. And all of those folks, they did their courses, but I don't do it quite that way. But part of what I've tried to convey in working with faculty is, even if you might have a very unique way of teaching something, you really need to think about why you're doing the MOOC overall, because to the large mass of people out there, these all look like a statistics course. And when they go to choose among them, they don't look at all 92 courses and pick the very best one or the one that does it just the right way. They usually pick the one that is closest to starting on a date that's convenient for them to start. That's their primary selection criteria. Coursera did a study recently, and they found out that one of the biggest factors in people completing a course is people signing up the week before the course starts. In other words, they're ready to go. Thinking about the instructor's goals is a really important part of pedagogical planning. So some of the things that the academic technology consultants who work in my group discuss with faculty are trying to make sure they understand what a MOOC is and what a MOOC isn't. There's sometimes a tendency to say, I want to take my current class and I want to replicate it in a MOOC environment. And we've already heard several speakers today point out that that's really not the best use of a MOOC. The best use of a MOOC is to do something you can't do in your regular class, or to experiment with your regular class by doing something outside the regular infrastructure of the university. So for example, at Duke, a typical semester is 14 weeks long, and that's very entrenched. And it's partly entrenched because all of our room scheduling systems are built around things being 14 weeks long. Our credit system is built around courses being 14 weeks long. There's all sorts of reasons why courses are 14 weeks long. But there's really nothing educationally that says a course has to be 14 weeks long. So one thing that I found very interesting with the very first group of faculty that we worked with, they would say, okay, how long does it have to be and when does it have to start? And I'd say, it can be whatever length you want it to be. It can start whenever you want it to start. Out of the first 12 faculty, none of them chose to make, one of them, only one of them chose to make their course the same length as their semester course. In fact, many of them said things like, well, you know, I always thought it made more sense for the first 7 weeks of my course. That all kind of hangs together. But because of the scheduling system, I had to come up with, another 7 weeks. So I do 7 more weeks after that. Or they would say, the first 3 weeks kind of fit together, and then the next 6 weeks kind of fit together. And so I'm going to just do that 6 weeks in the middle if I have the choice to do that. Another faculty member who teaches astronomy said to me, oh, it can start anytime I want it to start. He said, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start the course the week that a special astronomical event is happening out in the universe. And he did. So he started his course that week. And one of the very first things he asked students to do was to observe, and unfortunately I've forgotten what it is. It was an alignment of certain planets or something. I'm doing an injustice to his course. But he asked people to send in a photograph of what it looked like. And so within a day or so, people would say, oh, here's what it looks like in Paraguay. Here's what it looks like in Sweden. And then students started talking about that. He said, I love starting my course this way because now I can kind of align my course content with things that are happening in the universe at certain moments in time. I can't do that in my regular course because it has to start when all the other courses start. The second bullet, how should lessons learned from early MOOCs affect new courses? This has been an interesting challenge for us because we have learned, and several speakers today have pointed this out, that it's much better if you're using video for those videos to be short. Now, faculty will often say, but I need an hour to develop my ideas and set things in context. That's how I do it, and that's what really makes sense. We now have enough data from early MOOCs to be able to say to that person, you know, there's pretty hardcore data now that shows that people simply don't watch all hour long of an hour-long video. So if they say to me, well, I don't care, it has to be an hour long, I say to them, that's fine. Make sure the really important ideas are in the first 7 minutes, because I have data showing no one's going to watch past the first 7 minutes. So you can make it as long as you want, but put the good stuff in the first 7 minutes. But that's a complex pedagogical consulting thing, because faculty have been teaching their courses the way they have. They're the experts. What constraints are there for a course? I have had faculty who've said things like, well, the best thing would be if you could send a videographer to California, which is on, you know, 3,000 miles away from us, because there's some rock formations there that I'd really like to videotape and show. That's a trade-off, because that's very expensive if we were going to do that. Now, some of the MOOCs that are out there, at least in the Coursera and edX world, they have done things. There's a beautiful course on Chinese history from Harvard where they sent video people to China, but it was a very, very expensive course. So part of the consultation has to be how much is so special that you're going to spend that kind of money to do it, and how much are you going to say, I'm sorry, we just can't do it that way. Another thing, what expertise do different people bring to the project? The thing I'm thinking about here in particular is that faculty in regular campus courses might have a teaching assistant, and usually that would be a graduate student in the same subject area, often someone who's working with them. Those individuals have deep content knowledge, so they are very helpful in finding and evaluating materials for the course. But many times, in the US at least, graduate students may not have ever done any teaching. They may not know much about teaching, and hardly any of them would know anything about teaching a MOOC because they would not have had the experience to do that. There's a lot of things that go on in teaching a MOOC that are a combination of technical support and content, and it may be that they don't have the technical experience or the inclination or interest in doing that. So some of the roles that people have had in the past may not apply as well to the role for that kind of person in a MOOC. Who provides quality assurance? This is an interesting question as well when working with faculty who are very talented teachers and researchers. Many of our first group of MOOC faculty were teaching award winners, so they were very, very good teachers. But they also had strong feelings about how much time they had to spend on this and where they wanted to do their work. So for example, one of our faculty members said, I can only do this really late at night, so I'm not coming into a production studio where you have experts there because it's not convenient. I don't have time to do that. I want to create the videos on my own. So he came back with the first week or two of videos, and he had filmed them in his basement in really poor light, wearing a hoodie. And my heart kind of sank because I was thinking, okay, it was really convenient for you to do it that way, but thousands of people are going to see this and say, this is what faculty at Duke University look like. We decided in the first round to pretty much let faculty do what they want. We treated all of it as if it were an experiment. So after some discussion, we said, okay, if that's how you want to do it, you can do it. To our surprise, when the evaluations came in on that course, there were quite a few students who said, oh, I love the fact that he did it in his basement because he seemed like a real person. I could just imagine him as, he's everything I thought a professor was. His hair was always standing on end, and he was making goofy comments, and I just always thought that's what a professor was like. So who knew? But on the other hand, there may be things that you are not willing to accept. So part of your consultation with faculty about pedagogy has to be a really clear understanding of what you can and can't do. And then Finally on this list, how to balance instructor autonomy and institutional needs. It's a little bit of what I've been talking about already, but some of the faculty who volunteered to create MOOCs originally were excellent teachers, taught excellent courses, but we had decided that we wanted a balance of courses across different schools, different subject areas. We wanted the full diversity of our faculty to be represented in our first set of MOOCs. So that was a little bit difficult to say to some very, very good people, you can't do something right now because we have other kinds of institutional priorities that we're taking into account. So all of this needs to be part of the pedagogical planning for a MOOC. In terms of thinking about personnel and who you need to create a MOOC, obviously you need instructors and other content experts to create your individual course. We also provide pedagogical consultants. We call these people academic technology consultants. They usually have had teaching experience and they have technology experience. They help with all of the planning, thinking through the activities, the timing. The materials producers come from different parts of our campus. We have some schools that have their own video production equipment and personnel, and others that don't. So we have a central service in the library where we can produce things there, but in schools that have their own people, that personnel might come from that group. I already mentioned that a teaching assistant has different kinds of roles in a MOOC, but you need to think about who can play that role. We are doing a lot with assessment of our courses, so we have people with assessment training and skills who work with us on the courses, and they help from the very beginning in planning it, and then they help in doing the assessment at the end. Copyright, we've heard a lot about that today, and that is extremely important to have someone who can advise and help with copyright. Our librarians are involved. We have a librarian who is part of the team of every course we produce, and they are available to help faculty find open access material, help them understand whether materials that they are used to using in their campus course and are copyrighted, whether they can or cannot be used in a different kind of environment. We also have the librarians play a role in educating faculty about the importance of making their own research available as open access materials. We had one faculty member who wanted to assign 36 readings of scholarly articles that he had written and was astonished to find out that based on the contract he had signed with his publisher, he was not allowed to use his own readings in the course. That was the first lesson learned for him. He said, well, just see what the licensing is, and we'll just, if we have to pay, we'll just have to pay. I don't know who the we was in that sentence, but so we checked it out, and I forget what the exact amount was, but because the anticipated number of students taking the course was over 20,000, even a very low cost per page. The bottom line is it came to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there was no we that was willing to pay that. So we talked with him about the fact that if he put his articles in our institutional repository, our open access repository, his preprints, he could have students access the materials that way. So our librarians are playing an educational role in the MOOC development that isn't necessarily all about building the MOOC. That's who you need for creating a course, but we have found that you also need people to help with the overall management of the MOOC process. So on our campus, we have an overall champion. This has been our provost, our chief academic officer. We've had our news and communication, our press group at the university involved because people start calling up and asking questions, and so somebody needs to be able to answer those questions. And it's going to cost money to create MOOCs, and we hope that at some point they're going to recover money. That's been pretty small so far, but nonetheless, budget people need to be involved. And of course, the faculty who see these changes happening in the university, changes happening in teaching, need to be involved in the regular faculty governance process, providing advice and guidance about the whole overall movement of creating MOOCs. And then our university office for intellectual property and various contract negotiations and things like that has had to be involved in as well. So unlike an individual course, a single MOOC course can involve a lot of different kinds of people. Now, you don't need a full-time person for every course doing that, and some of these roles can be shared. In terms of production planning, again, there's the production of the course and production related to the overall program. So you can see there some of the different kinds of things that might be produced: video, readings, student practice and assessment activities, discussion and social interaction components of the course, and in-person meetings that may accompany the online version of the course. So we need to think about how all those different sorts of things get produced. And then in terms of the overall MOOC program, somebody needs to be managing all the pieces and all the people. There's a lot of moving parts to these courses. You need people who are working to communicate across the people who are involved and also people who communicate externally. You need to figure out who is going to interact with the people who provide the platform. Sometimes there are negotiations around that or technical problem solving. We've also been thinking a lot about the issue of media storage, because any one of these courses can have hundreds of pieces of media. And we made a decision early on that we wanted to store all of the components of the course locally at the university, in addition to putting them into the MOOC platform. Because our thinking was that if any of the MOOC platforms were to change suddenly, or the terms and conditions were to change, or we were to see a new one that looked really interesting, we wanted to be able to move the materials from one place to another. We did not want to have to go and extract them out of the MOOC platform and recreate things that way. But when you have so many files and they take up a lot of space, you have to think, where are they going to go? How are you going to figure out? In the beginning, people go, oh, I remember video number 14, that's the one about Mars. But over time, as you have more courses and things, that's not a manageable file structure. So we actually have a person who spends a lot of her time just organizing and documenting where things are. And of course, personnel management. There's a Duke planning guide that talks a little bit about our overall process that you can access on the web. So in terms of course material production, a couple of things that I would urge you to think about, and then I'll tell you how we're thinking about it at Duke. One is, are you sure video is best? There is a tendency right now where MOOCs, even though we say they're new and different, there's a lot of translation of an old model into a new model. And so one of the first things the early MOOCs did was to capture the faculty member lecturing and to make it a video version of the faculty member lecturing. We actually think that that's not such a good idea. Not only should they be short, there shouldn't be a whole lot of them. And the videos that we do create, we're trying to urge our faculty to move more and more towards something that is not what I would call a talking head. We found that, and again, there are data to support this, so you don't have to just do this as something you urge your faculty. You can show them the evidence that if students just see people talking, they tend to go through it at top speed, or after a while, they just skip it entirely and just read the transcripts, because most of them can read faster. Video production is usually the most expensive piece of producing a MOOC. So it's really disheartening to think that you're putting all this time into preparing video, and the first thing students say is there a transcript so I can skip the video? So we're trying to say to our faculty, if you do create video, make it something that must be watched. So if you see up here, we have things where faculty are having conversations across a group of people, faculty who are demonstrating things, and seeing it happen is important. Faculty are beginning to skip some lecture in favor of things like virtual labs where students can try things out themselves, or demonstrations of labs, or things like Google Hangouts, where a small group of people can participate online in a discussion, others can send in questions interactively, and then the whole thing can be recorded and made available to people. So we're trying to move towards more and more of that kind of video, less and less of the talking head video. And then we have a number of different ways we produce video because we feel like we still don't know what kind of video quality is absolutely essential. I mentioned the story about the faculty member doing things in his basement wearing a sweatshirt. His students love the class. We've had other faculty who've created much more sophisticated video. Those students love the class too. As we tried to do assessment and find out, well, is it because high video is better than low quality video, or what is high and low quality video? We found that the single thing that seemed to matter most to students was not the nature of the video, but whether the faculty member's style conveyed a sense of genuine interest in the student and enthusiasm for his or her subject matter. If the enthusiasm came through, and if the faculty member did other things while the course was running to show that he or she was listening to comments, reacting to those comments, interacting with individual students from time to time, those things seemed far more important than anything to do with the style or quality of the video. So I'm sure there's some quality below which we can't go. And I also agree with the speaker today who said that students' expectations are shaped by the very high quality video that they see in video games and movies and things like that. So I'm sure there is some level of video that's critical, but I don't feel that we know exactly what that is yet. So we have 3 different ways faculty can create video. They can do very high-end video in a studio. That's what you see on the bottom right. That is our astronomy professor demonstrating a physics concept about pendulums and where they stop. And we really don't want him doing that at home by himself. And he also wanted to create the videos in such a way that they could be made available under a Creative Commons license for any physics instructor to use. So we invested money and time in creating some very high-end demonstration videos, and we have the ability to do that. We also have in the library a multimedia production studio, and that studio is, it has more sophisticated things than a faculty member doing it all by himself or herself, and there are staff nearby, but basically there are little rooms in there that are set up. You can go in, they're ready to go, and you can do it yourself. We found that instructors often felt intimidated in the professional studio. Partly they seemed to feel conscious of the fact that the money meter was running because we have to pay for those services. And many times they wanted to do things over and over again until they felt they got it right. And we told them, that's okay, you can do that in the production studio. We don't mind doing retakes, but for some reason they felt self-conscious about it. Going into the multimedia studio, they can do it over and over again without somebody watching them stumble and without feeling like they are wasting somebody's time, even though we did not feel it was a waste of our time. And then there is a do-it-yourself kit that you can check out. We have it packaged up in an equivalent of like a rolling suitcase, and it's got a computer, a writing tablet, a camera, some editing software, a good quality microphone, things like that, and some documentation on how to use it. So they can check out a kit and meet with somebody to show them how to use it, get some advice about lighting and things like that, and then go do it in their office, take it home, take it into their lab. The vast majority of our faculty prefer the checkout kit. And it's not because they think that that's the best video strategy. It's because they can take it and work where they want to work. They can work in their office. They can work in their lab. They can take it home. And so we've been wrestling with this idea of we can get better quality if they'll come and let us help them, but they want to do things on their own so they have more control over their time and location. So part of our pedagogical planning and our project management is keeping track of things. And those of you who've already created MOOCs, I'm sure, are already aware of this. If you haven't done one, I urge you to think about this from the very beginning. The details of the text here don't matter, but these are essentially the video pieces for one of our courses for the first week, the second week, and we keep track of whether it's been recorded yet, whether it's been edited yet, whether the faculty member has signed off on the edits, whether the technical person has seen it, whether it's been uploaded. So all the different steps to keep track of this complex process. And you can come up with any kind of project planning or spreadsheet or whatever's easy for you to do, but starting from the very beginning to keep track of that will save you a lot of time later on. And then beyond the tracking of the pieces of an individual course, there's the tracking of sort of the whole project. So for example, we have multiple courses being developed at one time and being aware of where they are in that production process, when things are going to start, when the course assistants need to be hired to help with different parts of it. We assume that for every week that a course runs, you will need at least that many weeks in production. So a 12-week course would need at least 12 weeks of planning and production before it starts. We have a policy that until at least half of the course materials have been produced, uploaded, and tested, we won't advertise the course. And there's a tension there because the faculty want to advertise the course as soon as possible. They're excited about it. They want people to start enrolling. But with your campus course, you can do things at the last minute. You can stay up till midnight before your class starts, and you can pull that off as a faculty member. When you've got thousands of people waiting for the next piece of the course, you can't do that. So we prefer to have the entire course ready before it launches, but we require that at least half of it be completely finished. And this is what we use to keep track of, have they done the planning, has the copyright review been done, have the materials been designed, have things been uploaded, is a teaching assistant scheduled, just all the different parts of the course plan. Then when it's time to teach the course, we have a couple of things happening. Sometimes people talk about producing a MOOC as if it's a product, and that once the product's done, you just put it out there and you're done. But at least the way that we do MOOCs at Duke, the faculty members are all quite involved while the course is running. So we found that there are a number of things that you have to plan for while the course is running. Even if you think you've done everything perfectly, all of our faculty found out very quickly that there were things that needed to be corrected or improved or changed. In fact, this has actually been one of the most positive things for our campus courses. The astronomy professor, who's an award-winning teacher, has taught that course for 20 years. And he said he was shocked after the very first week of the course, with thousands of people trying it out, the number of people who wrote and said, you know, there's a mistake in the third sentence of the third video. And he'd say to himself, I've been saying that for 20 years and nobody's ever, none of my Duke students, who of course have paid for it and are getting a grade from me, none of them have ever raised their hand and said, you're making a mistake. But when you have thousands of eyes on something, you find that there are sometimes mistakes, or at least there are differences of opinions. And one of our faculty members said not long ago that he thought it was interesting that people who are paying no money and getting no grades or certificates in the course seem to be the ones who are absolutely most vocal about any flaw, error, or correction that needs to be made in the course. But many of our faculty, while the course is running, if there are legitimate mistakes or difficulties understanding, they'll re-record a little sort of just-in-time video where they'll put some kind of announcement up. So they're not done when the course starts. And then, of course, people just kind of keeping track that the course is underway, all the things that need to happen. The start button gets pushed when the course starts and so forth. Tech support in case anything goes wrong. And then data gathering is a really important planning consideration because we heard earlier today about the value of big data, but the only way you're going to have big data is if you collect data. And thinking about collecting that and at what point you're going to do it is really important. In a moment when we talk about assessment, I'll talk about why the data stuff is so difficult sometimes. So I'll just mention that one of the new roles that we ended up creating at Duke was something called an online course associate. These are individuals who are parallel to a research associate. But unlike a regular teaching assistant, these are people who do have tech skill training. They are willing to do the tedious work of loading questions, testing them, making sure the quizzes work, things that aren't really that interesting at all to a PhD student in biology. They typically don't have content expertise in the courses that they're working on. And we have they're full-time positions, and they're hired on a contract basis, but typically each one is doing about 4 courses at a time. And those have turned out to be terrific positions, and the people doing them have been very, very good. All right, I'm going to stop and pause, and I'm happy to take 2 questions if anybody has a question at this point before I finish up. Are there any questions or comments or anything at this time? I have a very quiet audience. Okay, well, I'll also have time for questions at the end, but I just wanted to check and see if anybody had a question or concern right now. Okay. All right, assessment. I am going to make you work. I know you're trying to just sit back, but you can do this, and I will not make you respond verbally. How's that? But I would like you to do this. I'd like each of you to take just a minute. You can either write it down or keep it in your head, whatever you want, and think about 3 things you would want to know about any MOOC created at your school. Any three things you would want to know, any 3 things you would want to assess about a MOOC. So take a minute to think about that, and then as soon as you have your 3 things, just turn to somebody sitting near you and just compare, and between the 2 of you, maybe pick 1 or 2 things that you think would be absolutely critical to know about a MOOC. So take just a few minutes to do that.
Which purpose?
Pardon?
Why would you like to know? Which is the purpose of
The purpose is, if in thinking about what to assess, what I want to know is what do you want to assess about a MOOC? Okay, so take just a moment.
¿Alguno de vosotros quiere contribuir, quiere responder a este juego? Por favor, levantar la mano para que os pasen el micro para que a su vez se pueda traducir las respuestas que hayáis puesto. ¿De acuerdo?
All right, so I'm going to see if people are perhaps a little braver. So if anyone would be willing to tell me 1 or 2 of the things that you decided you would want to know about a MOOC, raise your hand and the person with the microphone will come around, I think. And then the translator will be able to hear you and say what you... So anybody? You see some hand? Somebody here?
En realidad yo no había levantado la mano, pero nuestra respuesta de nuestro grupo es lo que ha escrito ahí en la primera línea, que somos todos de la misma universidad. En realidad esas 3 cosas son las que estábamos hablando aquí. Podemos leer ahí arriba.
Okay, you're going to have to translate for me so I know what it is.
Tengo que leer para que y las leo en español para que ella lo traduzca al inglés, pero ya están traducidas. Bueno, las mejores prácticas, incluyendo métodos, el diseño instruccional, los datos, que son muy importantes, número de estudiantes, certificación, etcétera, o sea, todo lo que es el tracking de estudiantes, y luego el papel del collective thinking, que no sé muy bien lo que quiere decir Eva con eso.
No te preocupes porque es verdad que yo desde ahí no veía que fuera escrito. It's written down there. So best practices, methods, instructional design, figures, student certification, and the role of collective thinking.
The role of collective thinking, instructional design, and how many students? How many students? What is their education? Okay.
Students, the ratio between students and certification, and so
The ratio between students and certification, the numbers who complete the certificate for the course. All right. Okay. Are there any other things you would want to know?
No. A mí me gustaría saber la interacción profesor-estudiante en estos cursos. Cómo funciona, la capacidad que tiene el profesor para responder a los miles de estudiantes que siguen estos cursos. Gracias.
So the question is, she'd like to know more about the interaction between faculty and students, and how can a faculty member possibly respond to questions with so many thousands of students? Okay, one more, if there is one more. Okay.
I've got two. Maybe you could choose.
Oh.
How to become myself into an actor, or how to change teachers' way of teaching,
Okay.
and how many teachers should be part of a MOOC?
Any one MOOC?
Yeah.
All right, so there were two questions there. One, how can a teacher transform herself into an actress, or the kind of teaching role that you need to have in the MOOC? And then how many teachers should be part of a MOOC? Okay, those are both great questions. I'll respond to the questions, but first I want you to just think about how different the kinds of things that you asked about were. And I'm bringing that up because when people say we need to assess MOOCs, they mean very different things. Some people mean, well, we need the data. How many students, what countries are they from, what's their education level? Some people are thinking more about outcomes. How many of them got the certificate? What % of the total number is that? What does that mean? And then other people are thinking about more documentation of the process. What does it take in terms of instructional design? What does it take in terms of how many instructors? How do people get coached to do a good MOOC? And all of those are excellent questions to answer. But you need really different kinds of data to answer those questions. So for now, oops, I'm sorry. I wanted to think about a couple of things. I'm going to be kind of a roundabout way of responding to some of it. First, I just want you to think about the question that came up around completion and how many people get the certificate. There's a huge interaction effect between the reasons why people took the course, the amount of motivation they had, things that happened during their lives while they were taking the course, and then the final outcome. And I bring that up because a lot of the early assessment of MOOCs was more along the lines of this: are MOOCs any good? Is a MOOC better or worse than a campus class? And I would argue you simply can't answer them without knowing these things about motivation and so forth. So here I took excerpts from some of the comments in one of our very first MOOCs where people were chatting in the online forums about whether they were going to get the certificate or not. And so just reading down, so one person said, well, I'm going to fail, but I'm also going to learn. Another person said, certificate for me is very important, all capitals, exclamation points. And on the far side in blue, another person said, I'm doing the quizzes, spending a lot of time for the certificate. But then the person right above them on the right in the pink said, I'm a university finalist and I have exams in a totally different subject to prioritize. So clearly this was not a high priority for that person. Person in the middle says, had I known the course would depend so heavily on math skills, I might not have signed up. And then down in the bottom left, there had been a hurricane called Sandy in the United States, and this person wrote, as a result of the storm Sandy, I've not been able to maintain this course. Is it possible I could retake the course at a different time? And finally, one of my favorites in the bright yellow, oh, there's more to life than passing a Coursera. There's knowing enough to shut down the smarty pants in the car. These are different students with very different expectations, different amounts of work. And I think you can imagine that the completion rate across this group. And these are just, what, 6 or 7 students out of 30,000 students. So when you ask a question like, well, how many people passed the course? And someone says, well, only 10% of the people who signed up finished all the requirements for the course. If you were going to conclude, well, that must be a bad course then because it has a 90% failure rate. And there have been many articles that have been written that describe it that way. There's a 90% failure rate. But I would argue that many people on here have no intention of getting the certificate or completing the course. Or if you've had a hurricane and your house has been washed away, it's probably not a high priority. So we have to think a lot about what it means to assess a course. So when you're planning for assessment, you have to think, what do you want to know? What kinds of data can you collect? Even things that seem very straightforward. Somebody asked, how many people are in the course and what's their educational level and where they're from. A question like, where are you from? What country are you from? That's one of the things we ask in our survey at the beginning. That seemed like a very straightforward question to me. And to make sure that it was clear-cut, we listed all the countries and you just check it off. Almost immediately, people started writing in and saying things like, well, I'm from Argentina, but I've lived in Bolivia for the last 20 years, and just recently I moved to Russia, so which one should I put down? Or people would say, well, I'm from the United States, but I'm on sabbatical in France, and I'll be taking half the course while I'm in France and half when I come back, so what should I put down? And then there were all kinds of political things saying, you may call my country by that name, but those of us who rebelled 30 years ago we refer to it as Catalonia, not Spain. And so I refuse to check Spain because I believe I live in Catalonia. So until you put that down, I will not check off one of your boxes. So even data like that are difficult to collect, much less the things about motivation and comprehension and other sorts of things. If you're collecting data, you have to have, in order for that to be useful to you in any way, you have to have someone who's going to store it, clean it up, make it accessible, back it up, and you need somebody who's going to analyze it and report on it. We are very fortunate in that the last year, we've hired 2 people. One is a full-time data manager who takes the data from all of these courses, and it's massive amounts of data, and does the work of trying to normalize it, standardize it, and figure ways to make it easily available to faculty researchers. And then another person is a program evaluator who is charged with taking the very kinds of questions that you all asked and going into the data and trying to come back with answers. She's the one that usually comes back and says, the thing about what country they're from, not going to be so easy to answer that with a high degree of confidence. So it's sort of an interaction between collecting the data, then going back and changing the questions, trying to make them more precise and so forth. So I've talked about challenges. And I do have a bibliography, which I meant to include at the end of the slides, but I don't think I have the link there, but I will send it to the conference organizers and maybe they'll figure a way to get it to you. Okay, let's put it all together. Pedagogy, production, and assessment. All of the things on this page are from one of the first courses we offered called Introduction to Medical Neuroscience, taught by a physician in our neuroscience department. In terms of the planning, he is one of the ones who said, I know how I want to teach this. I'm an award-winning teacher. So we stood back and said, do it the way you want. One of the first things he said when he was creating the course description page was that he expected students to work 15 to 20 hours a week on the course. Like, oh, no, these people are working, they're students, they can't spend 15 to 20 hours a week on your course. He said, that's what I expect of my medical students at Duke, and that's what I expect of students in this course. So one of the things that meant was, after the first week, a lot of people dropped the course, not because it was a bad course, but because it was a bad course for their moment in life or for the level of time they were able to put into it. However, the people who stuck with the course were a fiercely loyal group of people, and over 1,100 people have completed all of the requirements for the course, which is far more than he would teach in many, many, many years at Duke. He did ask to have his video shot in his lab, and that made sense for that class because he was actually taking human brains and dissecting them and showing people pictures of what he was doing. So in that case, the question, do you need video? Yes, he did need video for certain things, and doing it in the lab was the right place to do it. He worked very hard to make the course interactive. Somebody asked about interaction. He could not respond to every individual question, but he did design very creative student assignments where he asked them, after he talked about brain anatomy, to do something to show him, other than answering quiz questions, that they understood it. So you see a few of the samples. We have one student on the bottom right who created an entire diagram of the brain and vegetables. The person in the upper right did a more typical labeling, but if you look at the professor in the video and the particular brain that the person has diagrammed, it's a cartoon of the faculty member. One student baked a loaf of bread in the shape of the brain and then added a little narrative that went with it. So they did a lot of creative things. And part of why I'm bringing it up is, so you need the videographer, you need the pedagogical consultant, you need someone to help him design an activity like that, and then you need a technical person to say, well, if thousands of students are going to send in photographs and diagrams, how exactly are they going to do that? Where are those things going to go? And you, as the instructor, what are you going to do? You can't respond to everyone. He ended up using the peer assessment tool, but he also used that online course associate person to go in and sort of randomly pick examples to bring to his attention. And then he commented back in the discussion boards about a range of things. So somebody asked about answering individual questions. So you can't do it for every student, but you can take samples, and usually that sample of things that you respond to are going to reflect what a lot of other people wondered about as well. And last but not least, down at the bottom is a tweet that somebody just happened to notice, thinking about, was it a good course? Well, you could ask yourself, was it a good course in terms of completion? Only a small percentage completed, but the ones who completed were incredibly positive. But of course, we don't hear from the ones who dropped out, so we don't know what they thought of the course. But in this tweet, the person says, run, don't walk, to enroll in the second offering of Duke's Medical Neuroscience Coursera course, should it be offered again in the future. So that's a very positive comment. I point this out because we don't collect tweets about the course. And so when you're trying to think about assessment, there are many, many kinds of data that you're not going to be likely to gather. You're not going to get data from the people who drop out. Unless you have more staff than I do, you're not going to be going around the tweetosphere and collecting tweets about the course. And yet, all of those things could inform your thinking about the course. Okay, here the thing about what impact have MOOCs had on pedagogy. These are the kinds of things at Duke, and I'm not going to read every one, but the bottom line is our faculty have been rethinking their in-person pedagogy. They're rethinking whether we should try to change some of our campus infrastructure to make it possible to offer courses of different length. What would it mean to offer courses at different times? They have been thinking about how much could be done online so that the time people have in person is spent in really interactive, interpersonal activities. There's a growing sense that lectures are not a very effective way to teach and not what we want to be known for at Duke, so lots of conversation happening about that. All right, and to wrap up, these are the 5 trends that I see that will affect MOOCs and higher education in general over the next couple of years. The first one is truly thinking about education as a lifelong process. I think that's something many people say, but we now realize that we have students coming into our courses at Duke who have already taken the MOOC version of the course. And so in some ways that's good because people have had a chance to sort of sample a faculty member before they come, but what will that mean to have students in your course who are thoroughly familiar with the materials and have already done a lot of activities, and then others who have not. And then at the other end, we know that there are students in those courses who are retirees, they're mid-career professionals, they're Duke alumni. What does it mean to think about our educational offerings along that whole span? The participation, and Jennifer and I are going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow, in MOOCs has been international, and we suddenly have access to people from all over the world. So how can we leverage that and really make the most of it? Coursera has started a program called Learning Hubs, where different kinds of organizations in countries all around the world offer local discussion groups for people who are taking MOOCs. The completion rate is much, much higher for people who participate in one of the ongoing in-person discussion groups. So we have Duke alumni living in countries all around the world. How might we make them part of the course process and possibly part of one of those learning hubs? We've seen that the social component of education, especially peer-to-peer interaction, is a very powerful thing. Not something that we've leveraged very well in our campus courses. Of course, our students live on campus and talk with one another all the time. But the idea that students could create and produce materials and be very active in helping each other, answering each other's questions, is something we're beginning to think about using as a more systematic thing in our campus courses. I'm going to skip ahead to the thing about personal, let me just, on social, another thing for assessment. Students form all sorts of Facebook and Google groups, and again, we don't capture the data in there, so there's a lot of discussion going on that never gets captured in clickstream data inside of the MOOC platform. We heard about Khan Academy earlier today. I think Khan has done a remarkable job of giving students very detailed information on what they know, what they're prepared to learn next, and where they might need more help and where they could get that kind of help. And they display it all through a very personalized dashboard. This is something that's not possible to do in in-person classes in the same way that you can do online. So I think as educators, the online is kind of paving the way to making us think, gosh, what would it mean to give very personalized information to students about their progress and the kind of help that they need in ways that we haven't typically done with in-person classes. And then finally, here's another example in terms of personalization and individualization. This is an edX course, and some of the things that struck me about it are, first of all, there's more than one way to take the course. You can audit it, you can try for a certificate. Some of the courses have a campus version that you can take for real course credit. I think we'll see more and more of this in the future, that there will be multiple ways to take a course. And then another interesting thing about edX is that it has partnered with an evaluation portal, and it's decided to import the reviews of the course directly back onto the course homepage. That's a very bold move, because I know a number of faculty are very uneasy about student evaluations in general, and the idea of taking student evaluations and advertising them on the description of your course page in a regular course, I think would feel very threatening to a lot of people. But I wonder what students who get used to that in a MOOC will think when they come to class and say, well, I want to see the reviews. You go, well, I don't know, we don't usually do that. And then last but certainly not least, I think that the trend is towards open. Open doesn't always mean free, but teaching is much more open. Students can see courses before they take them. Faculty can see lots of different models of courses. Teaching is being made visible in these courses in ways that classroom teaching is not visible to most people. Open access content has become more important than ever. I think that's a good thing. And access, openness in terms of making education available to people who for many reasons would not have an opportunity to take that course, and not necessarily just because they live in a country with limited educational access, but there are all kinds of reasons why people at any moment in time might not have access to a specific course, and it's wonderful for those who have an opportunity years later to go back and take a course that they've always wanted to take. And I couldn't resist by finishing with this. I had a reason to go to Tokyo last year, and just at the last minute, I posted one of our MOOC courses, hey, I'm going to be in Tokyo. If anybody's who's taking one of the Duke MOOCs, lives in Tokyo, and you want to get together for some coffee, let me know. All of these people showed up, and they were great examples of things. Almost only a few of them were actually Japanese. Many of them were the people who said, well, I'm actually from Malaysia, but I live in Tokyo now. And they were very eager to talk about their course. So it was a lot of fun for me. And with that, I will end. Thank you very much.
¿Tenemos tiempo para preguntas? Sí, sí.
Maybe just a few.
Ya.
Yeah, okay.
Bueno, gracias por la presentación, Layan. Tenemos 10 minutos todavía y si alguno de ustedes están interesados en hacer alguna pregunta, ella está dispuesta y disponible.
Hello, I'm Eva Mendez. I'm the person who is twittering, so I'm just making the comments through Twitter, but I want you deserve to listen to me alive. You mentioned twice, at least in your presentation, that you don't gather the Twitter or the other social networking work of the students. There is any reason that you don't collect this data? I think they are absolutely valuable data.
Oh, I think the question is, why do we not collect student
Exactly,
data?
yeah.
Oh, we do. We collect
Okay.
lots of student data. We do a pre-course survey, we do an end-of-course survey, and we do polls throughout the course to get student comment and feedback along the way. And we also do, we take all of the comments in the online discussion forums and do a word analysis of those. So we do collect a lot of data.
Of course, you did, and you do, and you will do it. But I mentioned specifically the data that they are on the social networks. I mean, you don't do on purpose social network analysis. And I think most of the most important reputation of a MOOC happens there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm now teaching a course of social web, so I want my students to do that.
Uh-huh.
So I want you to legitimize a bit of this thinking.
So you're thinking about trying to collect things that are on Twitter or on
Exactly.
Facebook and all of those kinds of things. The only reason we haven't collected that kind of information so far is I just haven't really had staff with the expertise or time to do it. I agree. I know, for example, there have been a number of reports about the discussion forums in MOOCs and talking about how only a small percentage of people participate in them. But I think many of those conversations are happening outside of the MOOC. We know that people create Facebooks in their own language because they feel more comfortable. So, you know, the people who have the Portuguese Facebook conversation going, they might be chatting away all the time about the course, but they're not going to show up at all in the discussion forum. So we get a false impression that those people are not participating in the social features of the course. So I need to find out how your students are doing those studies.
Yes, I think we should do it
Yes,
together.
yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really inspiring.
Okay, great, thank you. Maybe one more question, and then I'm sure everybody needs a break.
I want to know how many people work in your team as a pedagogical support.
Okay, how many people work on my team for pedagogical support? We already had an organization called the Center for Instructional Technology that had a staff of academic technology consultants. There are 7 of those people. They already were working with faculty on ways of using technology in their campus courses. So they already existed. So we kind of redirected their time, a lot of their time in the last 2 years to working with faculty on MOOCs. That's not the only thing they do, but it is a big part of what they do. So those are 7 people So across the 20-some completed courses and I guess we have about 8 courses in development right now. Those people work across all those courses. And then in terms of the online course associates who help load the materials and participate in the course and do troubleshooting while the course is running, we have 5 of those people. And then we have the one assessment person, and she doesn't work full-time on MOOC assessment, but she does assessment of a variety of pedagogical experiments, of which MOOCs are one. And we have the one person who is the data manager, who helps keep track of the data and works with researchers who are trying to work with that data.
For how many MOOCs? Can you remember to me, please?
Sure. We have created and taught 20 MOOCs, and of those, almost all of them have been taught at least twice, and some of them 3 or 4 times. So even though it takes far less time the second or third time, it still takes some personnel, because many times people want to go back and revise and improve their courses, or they just use a different teaching strategy the next time around. And in addition to teaching the courses, 8 of the faculty who are teaching those courses are conducting some kind of research study about pedagogy and learning. And so the assessment person works with the faculty on designing those studies in addition to analyzing the MOOC data.
When you repeat a MOOC, second or the third time,
Mm-hmm.
does the number of students drop, and how much?
The question is, does the number of students drop when a course is reoffered? That has been unpredictable. I would say in general, yes, although not quite as we expected it. So for example, the genetics and evolution course, I think had about 22,000 the first time, then 25,000 the second time, 31,000 the third time. That one actually went up. Then we had a course, a philosophy. Our biggest course ever is a philosophy course that initially had almost 200,000 students in it. The second time around, it had something like 130,000. So it dropped, but it was still our biggest course. And then the third time it was offered, I think it might have been down to 110,000, but it's still our biggest course. So it's kind of hard to, technically, yes, most of them go down, a few go up. And one thing, this has to do with assessment too, we count the number of students who sign up, the number who actually start to do something, and the number who finish. But many of our courses are left open after the course ends, and people continue to sign up. Sometimes as many as 5,000 students sign up after the course is over, and they're just working their way through there on their own. So they don't get counted in anything. But to me, that may be one of the most dedicated group of students, the ones who are doing it all by themselves. Okay, thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.